All right, Mark, let's start off. Let's talk about this pretty broadly. Every report I've read when it comes to the Panama Canal, Greenland, and Canada, people say it's a combination of actual demands, statements made to get leverage, and just flat-out trolling. What does that say about the president-elect's upcoming administration, the fact that before he's even in office, he's making real demands, he's saying things to get leverage, and maybe even just trolling?
Well, Frank, I think the reality is he enjoys the trolling and he enjoys bringing attention back to him. And I don't think it's an accident that the focus on Panama was the same week of the passing of Jimmy Carter and his state funeral, because obviously that was a big part of the Carter administration was giving away the Panama Canal. I do think as well, though, that there is heightened concern about China. And I remember in 2019, the president sent Vice President Pence up to Iceland for an Arctic summit to talk to some of our allies up there about the concerns we had about China's growing investment. And I think that Megan's analysis was great about the fact that there has been a continued concern that China is not only investing in rare earth minerals, but also the shipping routes that Russia had been engaged in before, too. And so I think there is some national security component, particularly as it comes to Greenland. I think a lot of the rest of it truly is trolling, and as your report said as well, when it comes to Canada, the biggest import is oil and gas, which is obviously an industry very favorable to President Trump. And the notion of having significant tariffs on those sorts of imports, I think, is going to reverberate pretty negatively with those industries and their association with President Trump. So I think we'll have to wait and see how all that goes. All
right, so you were part of the first administration. I want to get a sense, were any of these things a priority for that administration? And also, how much meaning should we put into the idea that some of the president-elect's first ambassador picks were for Panama, Greenland, and Canada?
Well, I think, Frank, that Greenland was a conversation that was had within the administration, and concerns there, again, about the Arctic Circle and investments by China and Russia. And so that was a conversation. To what extent it was really about us acquiring or taking over, it was more of a national security concern about what other adversaries were doing in those areas. There was not much conversation about Panama or about making Canada a 51st state. As I said, I do think some of that is trolling, but I think it's an interesting juxtaposition as well that perhaps some of this messaging from President Trump is a warning signal to China. But, Frank, if you look at some of the decisions they made in the transition, I mean, joining with the Biden administration to oppose a merger for U.S. steel really benefits China. By hurting Japan, who's our closest ally in Asia, against China, it allows China to continue to have 50% or more of the manufacturing of steel globally. And today, the Trump administration has a lot of focus on his criminal prosecution. But don't forget, he's filed a brief with the Supreme Court that's getting heard today about TikTok. That, in the first administration, the Trump administration said TikTok was Chinese spyware and an enormous danger to America's youth. And now he's joining with the Communist Party in advocating to abandon that legislation and allow China to continue to own TikTok. And so some of the initial decisions they made have been very pro-China.
All right, so it sounds like it's a big switch when it comes to philosophy, when it comes to TikTok, but also just overall. During the first administration, it was more about nationalism, protectionism, America first, and now it seems like the president-elect has his eyes on the entire world. Can you just talk about that change in philosophy?
Yeah, Frank, I mean, it wasn't just the first administration, it was his campaign. Throughout the campaign in 2024, I think he was very clear of wanting to bring America back and advocating a far more isolationist foreign policy. And yet here, before he's even sworn in the transition, talking about acquiring Greenland, Canada, and the Panama Canal back. And so that would be a very aggressive interventionist foreign policy, which would be a great contrast to, I think, how he campaigned just a few months ago.